I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Size-Palmer.
And this is Arcade Mark. Welcome everyone to Linda's Adventures, Council of Thieves, Part 3.
In which we talk about Council of Thieves.
For the third time. Just to remind everyone, this is the Council of Thieves game that was Linda's very first game that she ran for more than just me.
So last time we went through part 1 and in the beginning of part 2.
Yep, we covered pretty much everything except the big dungeon at the end.
Dungeon at the end, yes.
Should we refresh people's memories on the characters?
Yes.
Okay.
We have Carl the Cobbler, the gnome sorcerer, very fond of color spray, not fond of having good anger management skills, and also fond of axes and coup de graceing people.
Red Cap bloodline.
We have Krokfree, the half-orc paladin of Shellen, catchphrase awkward.
Awkward.
Who really likes to keep things tidy, like, a lot. Particularly when he's feeling stressed out. We have Alicio, tiefling summoner and winner of the Who Has the Most Tragic Backstory Olympics with the quasi-vigilante alternative personality, human personality angel.
I'd like to thank the Academy and my mother for throwing me out on the street.
We have Lady Axis, tiefling paladin of Shellen, and NPC who is a GMPC who was useful at various junctures throughout the story for me to make sure that things kept moving, even when it was a little bit harder because the characters and the plot hooks didn't necessarily mesh together, and I didn't have the skills at that time that I would now to try to reorient the plot hooks. So enter the GMPC, and I talked some in previous episodes about how Mark helped me with constructing her and using her to keep things moving forward in those early days as a baby GM. We have Red Black, half-elf rogue, who I don't think even I ever learned that character's real name beyond their codename Red Black, the Spy Master for the Blades of Eridan, which is the name that our group had for the Children of West Crown, the reform-based organization that wants to make things better for the people of West Crown by defeating the shadowy beasts and probably not stamping out the terror that is the Thorstown House of Throne.
Nobody wanted to do that except Janovan.
Except Janovan.
And we didn't have the other two.
And we didn't have Stav or Soren just yet.
Not yet. We got them right after part 2.
So, when we last left our heroes, they had engaged in an inordinately complex plan proposed by Pathfinder Island Gonostovos, friend of Ariel, the leader of the Blades of Eridan, to participate in a play that was famously deadly, and then hopefully if they all survived through to the end, then they would get invited to a party at the mayor's house, and if they got invited to the party at the mayor's house, then they would be able to infiltrate the mayor's house and find their way into some of the things that the mayor had hidden within his manor, because everyone would be too drunk or otherwise incapacitated by the various foodstuffs of Chelish high society to really notice what they were doing.
Yep. Super complicated, super deadly. The exact kind of plan that a Pathfinder would set out Pathfinder contacts to do with no regard for their own safety.
But defying the true spirit of early season Pathfinder contacts, the PCs have managed to survive to this point.
That's true.
They made it through the play, the 6 Trials of Larazad.
Ironically, I think all the contacts survived, but the only Pathfinder actually might not have.
And they managed to actually really impress the very persnickety director Robal. And they were invited to the Cornucopia, which was a major feast at the home of Mayor Aberi Narvonksi, that had I know I mentioned before, there's an entire column in the adventure path that is that is taken up by the various courses of the meal. And throughout the meal, the PCs had there's sort of a proto influence system, I would say, in here, where the PCs can try to befriend the various people at the party. One change that I had made from the original AP is that the Majordomo Crocile was originally a tiefling, but in my version, the Majordomo Crocile had been a tiefling, but then she was murdered and replaced by an Arrhenius, who is then serving as the Majordomo Crocile.
We didn't know whether she was murdered or kidnapped or what happened to her at the
party,
but we knew there was an Arrhenius.
You didn't yet know it at the time, but you were very suspicious of her, and so then you did this whole trick, and I know we talked about last time what you did.
The paladin spiked the punch with a spell to transform it into holy water. And so then when she drank the punch, like, her throat started burning out and she had to run out of the place because it was the soft flesh inside of her throat that was just, like, on fire from drinking holy water.
But being, let's say, playing that rather nasty prank on the devil host, or the devil majordomo rather, was able to get her out of paying attention, her the most attentive person, so that you all could slip off from the party and begin to explore the Grand Valley.
Who could have done that spiking?
Who could have done that
Couldn't
spiking?
have been the paladin.
No, of course not. Of course not. You all were able to slip off into the manor, Abarian's Folly. Abarian's Folly, and we had talked about how last time that you had discovered through your investigations that the
the water being hot
and the water being, and some weird things going on with the water being super hot, this manor actually had a pit fiend that was bound beneath it, and was being used to run the utility closet, because apparently that is what Abigail Thrun does when she gets upset with pit fiends.
Like a deposed Infernal Duke, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty hardcore. Like, why? How else would you run the utilities in your house? Oh, I deposed you, Infernal Duke.
So, at this time the players were definitely thinking, like, oh wow, this imprisoned pit fiend below the manor. This is, like, definitely something we're gonna have to deal with in this part.
Total Chekhov's gun.
This is a total Chekhov's pit fiend. We're definitely gonna have to deal with it right now. So, but that's not actually what it was time to do here in this adventure. It was time to go into the Asmodean Knot, which is kind of a strange, extra-dimensional demi-plane that was carved out of the plane of shadow, and these dungeons themselves were a sort of a place where it's like, oh yeah, well, it pulls in pieces that were sort of from ancient history and kind of twirls them all together into this bizarre knot. So you've got this kind of weird maze. You've got kind of this weird maze and puzzle feel going on, definitely, when you're down in this dungeon. But the PCs weren't the only people who were in this strange place, where this demi-plane had, or rather, I guess I should say that it sort of had stone with these stone hallways, and the stone just kind of extended forever in all directions. So there was a lot of weird dimensional stuff going on here that made navigation kind of tricky, and it was very dimly lit, and it was hard to see around. But the PCs weren't the only ones here. There was also
a shadow dancer
agent, Sion of the Council of Thieves, one of the second perhaps member of the Council of Thieves you interacted with directly after the people who were at the party itself, though you didn't necessarily know that yet either.
Right, because there were multiple at the party itself.
Yes.
The first that we encountered as a direct adversary.
The first you encountered as a direct adversary.
Who was a member of the Council of Thieves.
So, I mean, this situation with the Pit Fiend, it wasn't entirely unrelated at all. The Asmodean Knot The idea here was that the leaders of the Council of Thieves had sent this agent Sion into the Asmodean knot to try to figure out some way to break out the Pit Fiend, and this was kind of their initial foray and exploration into this.
Well, turns out the Pit Fiend is not involved with that dungeon. Mm-hmm. They picked the wrong one.
So
we actually never were fully sure why that Shadow Dancer was there.
Yeah. Well, so you can learn more facts about the backstory of the adventure now.
It was just like we thought she was gunning for the same MacGuffin that we were.
Yeah. And so they had hoped that Sion would be able to sort of take her time exploring through the knot and figure things out. And then, of course, they learned that the party isn't just going to be filled with with easily distracted nobles who are too deep into their punch and other things. But the PCs are also going to be there. So both the Council of Thieves and the Blades of Eridan have decided that this party is the time to explore the manor and figure out what's up.
Yep. Council of Thieves, a lawful evil group whose plan is, let's create as much chaos as possible.
Yeah, I'm not so sure on the lawful part there, for sure.
But they are said to be lawful evil. They have literal devils, part devils, who are bankrolling this plan. With Mammon.
Sometimes alignment doesn't capture everything. So Sion had been sent in at this point, and Sion was supposed to explore the knot and
report. Did she have to cooperate?
Well, she had to. No, she needed to do the opposite of cooperate because she was told that she would receive a hefty bonus if she killed you guys while you were in there.
How did she even know we were going to be in there?
So the idea was that if she ran across you while she was doing her stuff, that she would get rid of you.
Yeah, but how was there even a shadow of a chance that she? Oh, that's just from the original. You're reading from the original AP because in your version, we were not known to be the Blades of Eridan when we were in the play because we were in the play in our civilian identity. I think that if you're reading it from the adventure, this is probably part of the adventure's sort of like schism in its personality as to whether the public knew that you were the secret group or not, whereas you presented it consistently that they didn't.
So she had the order to get rid of anyone if she saw anyone interfere. That's right. I knew that she had some kind of order to get rid of people.
Oh, yeah.
And I was getting a little confused there. But it was if she saw anyone else messing with her while she was down in the knot, then that was...
But the adventure path does kind of change back and forth, whether they think everybody knows you or whether you're a secret group. Like, it's not always consistent. I think it worked better with us as a secret group that just had civilian identities where we were all essentially vigilantes. That was very good.
Yeah. Although kind of interestingly, in that while Sion was supposed to be in there to like try to investigate some like sophisticated way to possibly like let out the Pit Fiend, the fact that she was just kind of ham-fistedly disabling traps and a variety of other things in there did actually destabilize the planar architecture of everything that was surrounding the manor. So,
it actually helped them.
It actually helped them.
They still had to go to the Nassian Spire.
They did.
That's the other dungeon.
Yes, you didn't have to go to that dungeon yet. So let's see. So you guys were. So she's got and she also had, in addition to herself, she had a bone devil friend.
Friend.
Very friendly.
How friendly can a bone devil actually be?
So friendly that they'll say hi with their stinger.
That's not saying hi.
Yeah, it is.
No, they're not happy to see you. That's actually a stinger.
Aww.
So, I know you're reading a bunch of things from the adventure, but let's talk a little bit about what our group was doing in here. Mm-hmm. So, we were mostly, other than the fact that we eventually ran into Sion, we were kind of just wandering around, being very perplexed by, like, weird things. If I recall correctly, they were, like, sometimes, like, voices that said that we had to do things in certain
weird
areas.
Wisps, there was weird wisps of shadowy fog and
chains that started laughing because technically laughing touch from face sorcerers was not a mind-affecting effect before the errata. And there was also the infamous Shadow Room.
Yes. The infamous Shadow Room.
It just made young shadows.
It
They're
just
not
made
that,
young
they're
shadows.
Not that
young
strong.
shadows
They're
aren't
lower
that tough.
CR. It just automatically creates them from mirrors.
This was where I learned that applying templates doesn't necessarily work in all circumstances. Because there were the young shadows, and I think I allowed the young shadows to be count as one level higher than regular shadows because they were more accurate.
But even then, we were lucky. I've heard that a lot of
the
groups
Tower
died
of Perpetuity.
here.
Yeah, it's like
we found
this giant. It's this giant maze tower that has all these entrances out of it, and like when you go in one, you might pop out the
right,
other.
the random maze.
And it was a random maze, and you were also getting attacked by shadows.
I thought the random maze was where we fought. Had to fight Sion. I thought that the shadows were in a very specific area where it was like a hallway, but there was a false wall. And or even a real wall, actually, because they're incorporeal. And on the other side of it was mirrors that were spawning shadows.
That's right.
And we had to smash the mirrors, but we actually did fairly quickly. And that's the only reason we didn't die.
The Room of Black Mirrors.
Yes.
Maybe I considered they were supposed to attack you. They did attack you. Oh, no, I see. They attacked you. I remember them attacking you in a rounded room. They attacked you in the tower.
Yes.
The Tower of Perpetuity.
They did attack us in the tower, but we made it to the mirror room, which is a hidden room, and destroyed the mirrors before it got too out of hand.
Yeah, the tower that had no floor or ceiling and just an endless pit.
Yes. That absolutely
Well, not
happened.
really an endless pit. It was one of those where if you fall into the floor, then you loop out into the ceiling and then over
weird,
and over again.
confusing maze is where we wound up fighting Sion.
Yes.
And then there were these voices with challenges of things that we had to do.
There were like these weird bodies that weren't actually bodies, and the laugh. I definitely remember the laughing chains.
Yep.
And there was
eventually there was like a Lord of Filth or something like
that.
was where we found the actual MacGuffin.
Yeah, and you also found
there was a devil.
There was also the intelligent glaive, Avigan's Edge, which is like, oh, this is a really powerful glaive. And this is a really powerful glaive. When you should sing the praises of the Prince of Darkness. And you guys were like, no.
We may have glaive-wielding
we
paladins.
may have glaive-wielding people, but we're not going to use this glaive. And the glaive is like, but what if you used me and sang the praises of the Prince of Darkness?
And nobody wanted to.
Wanted to use it. So they never used the evil, intelligent glaive that they found here. I believe that there was some conversation about, maybe we could redeem it, like Shellen redeemed her glaive, but, that she took from Zon Kuthan, but, no, that did not happen.
Did not work out.
Did you eventually destroy it, or did it just sit in one of your bags of holding for, the rest of the campaign?
I think it just had to sit in a bag.
I think it spent the rest of the campaign in an extra-dimensional bag, and then you forgot you had it.
It's possible. But yeah, there was eventually this very filthy area with the Lord of Filth.
The Lord of Filth.
Or something like that.
Well,
was it called the Lord of Filth, or was it called something else? It's been a while.
I don't remember exactly what...
That imp was the one who was running some of those weird rooms.
Yeah, they had the imp that was running the weird rooms. You had, a bunch of ghouls. You had the... Let's see. Oh, here's the Sturges. Here's where there were some more Sturges.
There were more, and it wasn't just a random encounter on the street.
It wasn't the original Sturges.
The original Sturges was just a random encounter you rolled when we were doing patrol at night.
Yeah, and then this is where... Oh yeah, this is the Sturge encounter that we mentioned before when Carl was like, it's Sturges! And it's like... in 2nd edition parlance, it would be a trivial encounter. But Carl was freaking out because he was totally afraid of Sturges from that
And then
early
he had
encounter.
a phantasmal killer of Sturges. The early encounter, they weren't trivial. They were a bunch of them during a patrol.
The Lord of Filth was a... there's the Lord of Filth.
Is it actually called the Lord of Filth,
no,
or is it just some kind of filthy thing?
It's a large water elemental.
It is the Lake of Filth.
It's the Lake of Filth, and there's a large water elemental in it. So I just called it the Lord of Filth because... Your name isn't just Large Water Elemental. Your name is Lord of Filth.
I mean, I guess we're lucky we didn't have to fight the end boss of Beneath the Silver Tire in 8 to 9 sub-tier.
Not this campaign. That was another campaign.
That was a different one.
We already talked about that in Kingmaker. So after defeating the world's grossest water elemental, you guys reached the heart of the knot. There is a strange staircase that seemed to go to nowhere, and if you had too many people climbing it at the same time, the staircase just completely vanished. So that was a weird puzzle staircase like that. Then you had you contended with a mummy, and
wasn't the Lake of Filth the last thing? Wasn't the Lake of Filth the last thing where we actually got the
you got one of the pieces there.
Oh right, there's multiple pieces of it because it's this weird thing. That's right.
You got one of the pieces in the Lake of Filth, but there were a few different pieces for it because you had to gather the 3 pieces that were tied to that the 3 objects that were tied to that ancient Asmodean, one of which being the glaive.
Right. And one of which being the actual, like, puzzle blocks, and then the third one was...
you got his unholy symbol from this room.
And
then there was that book, Drowned Jabe and His Miserable Brothers and Sisters that you got from the room with the ghouls. Yeah. Exactly. So you had to get all 3 of those pieces.
Collect all 3 while supplies
last. So basically, you guys explored through that, and that the ridiculous convoluted mazes then came at this point. So this place having thoroughly established itself as a puzzle dungeon, you still had to contend with the...
that's the one that I thought was the Lord of Filth.
He's the Outcast King.
He's the Outcast King, that's right. I knew he had a really pompous name and was in a really filthy area.
Mm-hmm. So what do you remember about
He's the one that's why I said he's all the way at the end.
So that's the one you remember, not
I was like, it's weird that it's a water element, though. I remember it had tentacles and was like a super Odiug.
Yeah, no, the Barbazu Odiug amalgam.
It's the Devil Odiug. That's what I had remembered being the final boss. So I was like, it's weird that it's a water elemental, though.
The water elemental with like the water elemental was in that big room that had that big lake of filth, and then he was coming out of that, and then you had the holy symbol.
Joe
was on
Jones
just
says it might be the Outhouse King.
Outhouse King.
No, it's the Outcast King.
Yes. So what do you remember about this Outcast King fight? Because honestly, it's pretty fuzzy.
Basically, it just suddenly was shooting out its tentacles, and people freaked out and poured everything that we had into annihilating it, and that annihilated it.
Legit.
That's what I remember about this fight.
I know at this point I was thinking more about the puzzle to come afterwards, which is certainly
Smites came out. It was like it was freaking us out, and then it died because Smites came out.
I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. If you've got something that counts as an evil outsider, and you've got paladins, and they're smiting, and it just dies. Yeah, like this was definitely not the most challenging campaign with the multi-paladin group, but it didn't have to be.
Hey, we only had 2 paladins at this point, not 3.
No. So you had...
Stay tuned for the 3rd paladin after this puzzle.
So the Chelish Crux was I don't even know what it said that you normally did if you just like...
Oh, I'm pretty sure that it said that you roll a skill check while having like a sidebar or a prologue at the beginning of the book, or something about that saying like you should never do puzzles.
But yeah, no, this was a session that I know I've mentioned in a few other episodes because I had 3 players that day and all 3 of them were super into puzzles. So
this is a session, she means we stopped the session after killing the other thing. And then we called a session for only the people who like puzzles.
And we did a super complex puzzle. I'm not sure if I still have it somewhere, but it was a puzzle with multiple dodecahedrons, and you had to rotate them in certain patterns to spell out a certain message, and you could figure that out based on the dots. dots that were along the edges told you how you were supposed to rotate
It
once
had
you got
like
to
the
that initial edge.
the symbols of the Archdukes
Yeah.
of Hell.
One of them had
and
the symbols of the
Thrune
Archdukes of
and-
Hell and Thrune was supposed to be the one that was more powerful than any of the Archdukes or Asmodeus.
So that was like theoretically part of the theming, but my attempt to use logic of the Archdukes and Thrune being the best was useless because the only way to actually solve the puzzle was the dots, which was a mapping that the one of the players figured out. At Alex, one of our players figured out, and the other player and I tried many different theories, all of which did not help or partially help to solve it. Because the theming actually wasn't relevant with the way Alex solved it. I think the way you initially wanted us to solve it was going to use the lore plus some other things to solve, but then Alex figured out a mapping that just solved it entirely based on the dots.
I do remember that you guys were going like super deep into the lore. I had something that was sort of lighter lore plus the dots to figure things out, but like it was constructed thoroughly enough that it was technically possible to figure it out with the dots. But like Alex, who was another person at MIT with us, he was a math major who was a year
player
ahead of
of
me.
Red Black, the rogue.
Yeah. And like one of the people who the main person that I would consult when I was totally stuck in my classes, he basically just like pulled it out and made this complex graph theory diagram, and I'm like, how did you do that? And so then he like actually taught me all the math that he had used for it. But I was just like, yes, that's correct, but I hadn't even possibly considered you could do it that way. I guess that means I constructed the puzzle right because it was technically possible, but I did not consider that.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sure I have those somewhere still in like our keepsake boxes, but that was really fun as a puzzle session.
Yep.
And yeah,
there were like real physical props that Linda had built of two because it was like it's originally a dodecahedron, but Linda had it split off into two separate dodecahedrons, each of which you had to use separately to solve the puzzle.
Yeah, you had to rotate them correctly so that you could make them merge with each other, and then once you did that, you were able to open it.
Shelby, this is the end of book 2. We're in part 3 of our recap, but our recap doesn't always cover a whole book per time. So we're very, very ending part 2, which, admittedly, if I recall correctly, part 2 may be just like, oh, sorry, we're out of time, go to part 3 to see how to open it.
Yeah. The adventure ends as the pieces emerge from the Asmodean knot with the Chelish Crocs in their possession.
Yeah, see, so part 3 is the one where it just says, don't do puzzles, do a D20 or DC whatever intelligence check. But we did puzzles. This is also in between while Linda gets up her files and her notes of what she did in part 3. We picked up 2 new PCs. We picked up Soren, who is a bardic lore master who is a disciple of Island and an actual Pathfinder. Because Island said now that we had the keys that we need to get into...
Island being the one who started
everything. Like, go do the murder play. Go do the murder
quest.
play so that maybe you'll get something that could get us into the banned Pathfinder Society Lodge. So Soren, her disciple, was going to join us because she didn't trust us in the Pathfinder Society Lodge on our own. And then we also got a new member of the Blades of Aridin, Stav, who is was a elven paladin of Torag, who did not really care about or associate with dwarves in any way or defend people, but liked to make dinner for people and was very suave and liked to fight with, I think, like a rapier.
Yes.
Yeah. So, we added Stav and Soren to the group to round out our group with a very well-rounded party for Council of Thieves. Paladin, Summoner, Rogue, Bard, Sorcerer.
Yes.
Is that right? Did I miss somebody?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Very well-rounded. Half paladins. That's always what you want.
Yep. Definitely well-rounded.
But
So,
you didn't have your auras of justice yet. You weren't high enough.
we did not have our auras of justice. 3 auras of justice is very just.
So, when you finally got this crux open,
Wasn't there like a decapitated head of a devil in there?
There were several things in there. There was treasure, as naturally, some scrolls and wands and stuff like that. There was a silver box with some grave candles that could be used to speak with the departed. There was a leather portfolio that had some useful information in it. But before we get to that, there was the most obvious thing that was in there was the head of an Arrhenius. I mean, that's exactly what you want to find when you open up your treasure box. It's like, oh look, we got scrolls and wands. And,
why still living head?
Why is this Arrhenius head screaming at us?
Or I guess an Arrhenius now,
yes.
rather than using the plural. But back then the plural was the singular, and the singular was the plural, and it was Arrhenius all the way down. And so there was just a head that abusively that
yelled various like abuses and insults at people.
Yep.
But
unfortunately for that head, she didn't realize that she had the Sheldon Paladin Redemption Squad, and they could out-redeemy speech her insults by just... It's like, you're a head. If you're a head, you can't leave, and you'll just be here and have to listen to these redemption speeches over and over again.
Yeah, so they essentially intimidated her with the threat of needing to listen to constant saccharine redemption speeches into stopping yelling at her. Instead of stopping yelling at them, because they proved that no matter how much she yelled at them, they just didn't care.
Yep.
But she was one of the more unusual sources of lore that I've seen in an adventure, because her backstory was that she had her head had kind of been passed around as a trophy, and like just people were like, oh yes, let me just stick this Arrhenius head in the center of my table, and I'm like, nothing could possibly go wrong with this. But she, between her screamed insults, remembered what she was hearing around her, and then started using that information to continue to manipulate situations and turn people against each other, which is what in the end got her locked inside this puzzle box in the first place. But she still did know some information that was useful to the PCs, because she had some experience with Delvehaven, the lodge that the Pathfinders were trying to get into, and when the whole reason they decided to go after this crux in the first place is because they expected that it would hold or be or somehow be connected to the key to breaking the wards on this Pathfinder lodge.
Didn't we still need something from, like, a petrified collection of some rando before we could get into Delvehaven?
Yes.
The crux was not actually the final step in the ridiculous multi-step plan.
Well, that's why I said would hold or have or that kind of thing.
But I just remember that there were these other side quests because it led to one of the most iconic moments of the campaign.
But yeah, certainly between the memories of Kazray, the Arrhenius, and the Delvehaven papers, which were a bunch of ledgers that talked about the history of the lodge, and one of the things that they talked about is some different places where the Delvehaven Pathfinders may have hidden their various treasures, which. And
as well as, I think, like, the main venture captain guy and his good friend, Ilnuric Sivenshin.
Yes, the main venture captain guy and his good friend, Ilnuric Sivenshin, who, you know... Ilnuric Sivenshin must have been a real stand-up guy. Like, there's no way that Ilnuric would ever get involved in anything nefarious. There is a list of missing Pathfinders as well.
I mean, there may have been some hints at a nefarious nature, but I feel like that's just an artifact.
Yes. And So the list of missing Pathfinders was sort of there as a way as a lead for the PCs to potentially follow up on that and figure out what had been the final fate that had befallen the Pathfinders.
What was the name of the VC guy?
The VC guy. I'm blanking at the moment.
Who was not Elnric, but was the other guy.
Galfini Ager?
No, I don't think this.
That was an older. That was the one who ordered the sealing of Delphaven.
Right, because the VC guy was dead by then. But by the time that Delphaven was sealed, maybe that wasn't in the papers.
Maybe it wasn't in the papers then. Yeah. Because he's the only VC who was mentioned in the papers. And then there was Donatalis Bisbee, the leader of the Amber Privateers.
Bisbee.
Is that who you were looking for?
Yeah, I was looking for Bisbee. Bisbee and Ulrich Sivenchen.
Yes.
Yeah, it was definitely him.
Mm-hmm.
So then we found out there were still more side quests that we had to do because we had to check these Pathfinder places, and I think we needed to get something from someone's collection, and to do that we would be required to win a trophy from a underground fighting arena.
The Devil Drome.
Yes. It was not just any fighting arena though. It was a summoning fighting arena.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to remind you, while I'm playing the summoner Elysiel, who has Angel, her sort of vigilante identity, who is a not tiefling, just standard looking churlish woman who likes singing in bars with people, being popular, and fighting in arenas. When she fights in arenas, she fights just with a Morningstar in melee, using no amount of magic, and just fights people in combat arenas.
Mm-hmm.
So, by this point, in the Asmodean Knot dungeon, at some point, I can't remember exactly where, I did, the PCs did find Mr. Kitty by Eidolon and figure out that, in fact, the Eidolon is a real thing. And, we then realized that, I actually had an Eidolon, although I was mostly summoning Lantern Archons.
So that was late. That was late part 2.
Yes.
By the time that your Eidolon was anything other than a character that took care of things in the background.
But keep in mind, nobody externally knows that Angel is a summoner because she's just some person who fights with the Morningstar.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went to the Devil Drome, which is this major summoning arena where you can just summoner versus summoner, you can summon any number of things, but they have to be all the same monster. As many times as you want until one side wins. And each of the two summoners is in this special cage that protects them from the monsters attacking them, and you don't attack the other summoner, you just keep summoning things in the summoning fight.
Yeah.
So
then that means though that once you summon one thing, you're stuck with just summoning that one thing.
One type of thing over and over again.
Yes. And that rule is important.
That rule is very important. But also, when Angel said that she was gonna fight in the summoning arena, people are they know who this person is because she's kind of a celebrity, but she's not someone who uses magic at all. Mm-hmm. So the person who runs it is are you sure you want to go up against the champ? I want him to lose because he keeps winning too much. But
Mantrathor Thrax is a real.
He's really good at summoning, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And and Angel's oh, well, just give it a try.
And they're okay.
And so everybody in the arena bet on the reigning winning champion who had won every time in a row.
Not everyone.
Except the PCs.
The PCs.
The PCs bet big on long odds on Angel.
And the PCs down there are you sure you want to bet for this person? Okay.
They bet a lot on me.
Mm-hmm.
So here we were in this cage, and Manchester Thrax, or whatever his name was.
Mantrathor.
I think we called him Mandrake.
You did call him Mandrake.
So Mandrake, he starts his summoning, and he has a good summoning build with augment summoning on Lemures, and he has them in a bunch of slots, some of which can summon large numbers of the Lemures, and the cage match of the arena they can climb up on, so that they have some mobility even though they're Lemures, and he had, I think, something that let him summon as a standard action.
Yeah.
It was pretty good wizard conjurer. So you may be thinking, okay, so she summoned her Eidolon. I did not summon my Eidolon. I summoned one set of Lantern Archons.
Jim suggested Lantern Archons.
Well, I was talking about them already from part 2.
Yeah.
I summoned a set of Lantern Archons, just one casting as a standard action. Thrax kept summoning Lemures, he was summoning it round after round after round after round, and buffing them, which you were allowed to do. I summoned one set of Lantern Archons and then started making a martini, as the Lantern Archons annihilated his Lemures, just completely.
So the crowd is going nuts because most of them have money on Thrax winning. The Lantern Archons are just merrily flying around, kiting down the Lemures. And
the guy who's running it wants the champ to lose because he just keeps winning, and people were bored. They're very interested in this. And eventually, Mandrake is just like the fact that I wasn't making an expression. Angel was literally making a martini.
Yes.
And eventually finished the martini. Just each round, Linda's like, what do you do? It's like, okay, now I do the next step. She eventually finished and started drinking the martini. And when it was clear that the Archons were definitely going to win because they had broken momentum on his summoning of the Lemures,
his Lemures were reduced to, trying to climb along the ceiling and hope that they were in the right place to drop on the Lantern Archons, and they really often weren't.
Yep. So he just, got so angry at this mocking that he used the Conjurer, 8th level Conjurer ability to bamf into my cage and then used a gem of elemental summoning fire to summon this enormous fire elemental to destroy me, where I was in a different section than my Lantern Archons were. So, this is the playtest summoner, because it's relevant, otherwise I would not have been able to do this at the same time my Lantern Archons were still out. So at this point, he's cheated, and everything is up and he had apparently thought about this beforehand, I guess, because he had a bunch of pre-buffs up and some Stone Skin. Stone Skin costs money.
Apparently, he casts Stone Skin, Mage Armor, and Shield before every time he goes into the ring.
Yeah, that's so much money to consider the fact that you might be murdering someone.
Consider the fact that you might be murdering someone.
And he never did any of his other times. It doesn't make any sense, but he did.
He did.
And so he starts his giant fire thing, and I was like, I used Maker's Call. Because my Eidolon was out. He just wasn't there. And so suddenly, my Eidolon appears and starts tearing into the fire elemental, and is obviously better than the fire elemental. And this is something I summoned that I clearly could have had, to fight the Lemures too. I just didn't. I figured that you're not worthy of seeing my Bankai. So, at this point, he's basically goes from you're gonna die to oh crap. And then he uses his Conjure ability again to bamf out of the cage and just into the crowd and starts running out. But Carl, the sorcerer, gets the crowd riled up against him for his cheating attempt to kill and cowardice, and they start throwing tomatoes and other things and also deadly weapons into his back. And even with his Stone Skin, they managed to knock him out. I believe Carl cut off his head also.
Carl did cut off his head. But not before asking the crowd what should happen and riling them into a chant of them chanting to cut off his head.
And then also, I think, asking the person who runs the Devil's Road, what justice will there be for this person who cheated?
Yep. So
I felt like it was a very iconic moment
was.
for my character. Was it just people just went wild because, it's some rando who fights with a Morningstar, okay? I was high enough level that just most people who do random fights in the arena are not very good at it because they just can't do anything else. And so I was winning, but, not just, overall, because I had a lot of hit points and high AC. So the fact that I was actually very good at summoning was a big shocker to the crowd. And it was really funny. And we got a ton of money from betting on
I don't know how much you guys multiplied your money by, but like it was pretty intense.
It was not as much a percentage of wealth earned as in the post-Arthurian game I ran. The amount of money people got from betting on your knight in the round table tournament and then cheating to make sure that you won.
My knight would not agree to any.
That's mostly just because there wasn't a lot of wealth given out in that campaign, and and then also because the party constantly bet everything on you.
Yeah.
Even when you were going up against major characters who were much more powerful than you.
They had all sorts of really good tricks to try to cheat for my character. Like they used like mirrors to shine into the eyes of the opponent.
Light into people's eyes.
They magic was rare, so they managed to, but they had like some kind of ale.
There was a magic beer from Guivnu, the god of beer and smithing, the Celtic god, and they spiked a toast to your success with that magic beer to give you a buff at one point. It was
hilarious as a player because I knew that they were all. I of course knew that they were all trying to cheat for my character without my character noticing. So just like playing out the person who just doesn't even notice.
Yep, that was where there was a lot of multiplication. There was still a lot of money made on this, and it was. Definitely, the owner of the arena couldn't have asked for like a weirder show that everyone was expecting. So, I don't know. I thought it was just so hilarious because of just how snide people were. And honestly, they were a little bit sexist towards Angel. A little bit, almost like, okay, honey, you can go into the arena for summoners.
No, I totally had them be sexist jerks because
hell is sexist.
Yeah, and B because I knew that you were going to kick the crap out of. I knew that you were going to kick the crap out of your opponent, and they were going to be out a lot of money. So.
Yep.
It was funny. Sounds like he was tried by a jury of the audience members, but Charlie seems the type to distinguish the state of mind.
Because they're talking about it's not murder without the premeditation, and then Jim said what the teleporting to the cage was premeditation, unless it's a fit of rage.
I mean, this is normal PC justice, though. Like, if somebody goes up to one of your party members and tries to kill them, then like most PCs aren't gonna think twice.
Yep, that's for sure.
So you were able to win the prize, the Hell Colors Cup for your victory.
And that's how we got something from that collection, right?
You got the bust of Galefin.
Which was petrified.
Petrified remains.
And then we used the candle.
And then you used the grave candle to do a seance with
That's
him.
what it was.
Yeah, no, because the idea here was that in order to learn... The idea is that you found enough information about the Pathfinders to try to follow who had initially been at Delvehaven, to follow up on the leads from them, and the Crux conveniently also had a number of grave candles that was appropriate to the number of Pathfinders that you needed to find, almost as if
thanks, Chalice Crux.
It's almost as if there was some force in the universe that was trying to make sure that you had what you needed to succeed.
Fate.
Yes.
Was it fate? Yes.
It was fate. So one of the next places you went, and I don't remember exactly what order you did these in, so I think it's probably easiest just
The Devil Drum was just the one that was more iconic. I think we did it last after some of the weird little hidey holes where the other ones were.
Yeah, so this was also the time you had the battle against the Sisters of Iseth, yes.
Yeah.
Who worked out and lived out of the friendlily named Massacre House.
Also in the ruins, that area where the guards are just like, we're not going in there, we're just going to make a wall and stop anything from coming out of there. So the Sisters of Iseth worship Iseth, the mother of Erinyes and general queen of the night. Also, actually, a close personal acquaintance of Elysiel's grandma, but sure.
Elysiel's family tree.
They're a little messed up. I think we're gonna have to go into that later on in the campaign.
Yeah, no, I think we will, because you hadn't really had a chance to figure any of that out yet.
Elysiel didn't know, but I told Linda, just to give her a hook for things, that one of my character's quirks is that whenever there was like magic that was since Westcron's full of like old dying magic that was like supposed to respond to Aridin or Aridinites, but then Aridin never showed up. And one of her quirks was that she would activate those because of the fact that her grandmother was going to be an angel who was working with Aridin, but she fell as a result of Aridin's death. And is not quite Queen of the Night status, but is close behind. And so, yeah, her name was Dione,
yeah.
and yes. Whereas Elisel's mom was a half-devil named Celeste.
So friendly.
Celeste. And she initially thought that maybe her daughter was also going to be a half-devil, too. But then she realized she was a tiefling and got rid of her because tieflings are trash. Little did she know that the Eidolon that Elisa as a child had bonded with would protect her and allow her to survive. We'll get into that later on.
Yep. Like I said, tragic backstory Olympics.
Woo! But we already talked about the fact she had no friends and lived on the street, and even on there she was taunted by everyone and sold trash to people. But that was also, like, that was her mom.
So there were, so the Sisters of Iseth was, and I remember that we had gotten confused a little bit, or at least I had a little early on, but like, wait, wasn't there that Iseth thing or whatever? And that wasn't until here.
Yeah, that's not until here. We go back to the ruins, and we went to the Sisters of Iseth because they had one of the Pathfinder's stuff that we needed.
Yeah, you were able to do a seance for Coriana, who had smuggled out a bunch of equipment from Delvehaven that you were able to retrieve, and that was also give you some information, some coded instructions about how to open the door. Was at that point as well, of Delvehaven, and then there was also the wave door that you had to go out to, for which you had to go out to Cutlass Cove.
That's the one where we actually legitimately found a cache rather than just only talking to ghosts.
Yes, exactly. And you fought some more shadows. Young shadows attacked you again here.
Because you know what? This is the AP before they realized that. I think that caused people to realize that maybe the young template is not always a fair and reasonable thing to do for incorporeal creatures.
Yep. So those were all the parts that were sort of before we get into Delvehaven itself.
That gave us everything we needed to enter the old Pathfinder Society Lodge of Delvehaven that had been sort of quarantined off after lots of bad things going on in there. So, Linda, do you want
By order of Thrune.
That's right.
Do you want
to stop here as a good stopping point? Just in front of the dungeon, just like last time?
Let's start in front of the dungeon, just like last time. That'll also give me some time to review my notes a little more than I had time before this one.
But we still got to talk about the Devil Drome.
Yes.
Still just found that very satisfying to just... all the things that happened. It was great. It was just funny when he came in and he's like, this is expensive, but I'll see my large fire elemental.
It was funny too, because like in the crowd, the main people who were cheering for you were the PCs, and most people were like, I don't know, but there were still some people that were cheering for you.
Some of the people who just hadn't gambled thought that this was exciting or just hilarious.
And there were also people who hadn't gambled very much on it, who were just like kind of there more for the entertainment.
Also, there were people who liked Angel and were a fan of her from Melee Arena, or her like just singing in taverns.
Yeah, I mean there were people who betted like a tiny amount on you just in case,
just for fun. There were definitely people who were cheering for me just because they liked Angel.
But nobody put like any appreciable amount of money that they would actually care about in, except the PCs, because no one actually
because they didn't even think I could summon something. Like, maybe I had a scroll that I was going to UMD to summon one thing or something like that.
And you were just doing this as a publicity stunt.
Yep. just to get fame for my melee arena,
Mm-hmm.
or that I was gonna back out at the last second and do the version that they allow where you just go in and fight all the summoned things, but you can't attack the summoner.
Yeah.
For parties who don't have someone who can summon.
Mm-hmm. But it all worked out.
Yep.
So let's say goodbye to YouTube.
All right. Bye, YouTube. See you
Bye.
next time.